What we have actually done for the last session or the last panel, we have converted it into a fireside chat with Mr. Dev Khare and Mr. Vikas Jain. Mr. Dev Khare, the Principal Lightspeed Venture Partners, who was also our moderator for the very first session. Sir, may I request you to kindly join us on stage. Along with Mr. Vikas Jain, co-founder and director Micromax. Mr. Vikas Jain serves as business director and promoter of Micromax Informatics Limited. He has over 14 years experience in international business and planning and the information technology sector. He has previously served with Daewoo Motors engineer QC approval and GE Motors as co-op student. Would like to welcome Mr. Dev Khare and Mr. Vikas Jain on stage, and this will be a very, very interesting fireside chat.
All right, thanks. So this should be a fairly short 25 minute session. Honored to have Vikas here with us. As one of the founders at Micromax, he has a great insight into how the market has developed over the last several years and what will happen over the next couple of years. So I'll try and bring again, like morning, we'll try and talk a bit about the facts and figures up front. And if anybody has a question while we're talking, put up your hand, identify which organization you're with, and please ask the question. Let's make it conversational. So Vikas, maybe you can do a little bit to describe Micromax for a minute, and then we can get into the size of the market in India and where it's going.
Very good evening to all. To bring about Micromax in front of you, we are an India-based handset company. We are there into GSM, CDMA handsets, as well as a couple of other form factors like the data cards and the tablets. Besides India, we have geographical presence in the SAARC countries of Nepal, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh. We are also doing business up in Middle East, in the UAE, Qatar, Kuwait, Oman, and we've also launched our Latin American operations in Brazil. From a volume perspective, we are shipping out about 1 million devices a month, and I think on the we also talk about the Indian market.
Yeah, we could talk about the market. What do you see? What are your sort of views on how big the market is? How many handsets a month are being shipped today in India versus a year ago?
So on the market, with the the different analyst reports and the different audited reports which are available in the ecosystem, it would be safe to say that on an organized basis, the industry adds up about 15 million handsets a month. And I think on the revenue perspective, the handset industry is pegged to be at about 56,000 crore of Indian rupees. The ecosystem, as we talk about, is still largely 2G driven, but over the last 1 year, we've seen a good offtake of the smartphones. That's going north. A lot of people are adopting and embracing smartphones. Obviously, I think the connectivity, which is getting 3G now available on the most of the carrier networks, is helping adoption of smartphones. And
just a question there. Of the 15 million handsets a month being shipped right now, how many are 2G versus 3G? We've had a lot of talk earlier in the day about all these services available over 3G. What's the reality in terms of how many 3G handsets are being shipped?
They will be very interesting because we also got to appreciate that a lot of the devices which are sold might be 3G, but they might not be selling using 3G as a seller proposition. So, a couple of times, for example, I would say, just to take an example, iPhone 3S, I mean, honestly and realistically speaking, is it selling because of 3G or is it selling because of the app ecosystem that Apple has built upon? So, but then, to be on the safe side, I would say roughly about 1 million of this is already 3G enabled handsets that are being sold on a monthly basis.
So 14 out of 15 million are not 3G, are just 2G phones shipping today.
Yeah, so we got to appreciate that 3G is coming new to India, and the e-video, which is the older version of 3G, which is launched by the CDMA operators, has been in the country for some time, but unfortunately the handset ecosystem in the e-video is leaving much to be desired. So we are talking largely GSM, and we are talking largely the WCDMA technology.
And how about the segmentation between smartphone versus feature phone on these 15 million?
We've seen a good offtake. I think from the ecosystem perspective, most of the brands have now had focus onto smartphones. Samsung has been a good example, taking the lead up and putting a lot of these smartphones in the market because consumers are embracing them. Good point is even as the entry cost of the smartphone is coming down and there's a lot of adoption happening over there, even the high-end models are also selling in good numbers. I would be given to understand out of about this huge base that we sell as an industry, roughly about 800K should be the smartphones that are selling on a monthly basis.
And that's up from what a year ago in terms of smartphones sold a month?
Roughly half the number.
Half the number. So the take rate has doubled in some sense on the smartphone side. So a year ago, I think we talked before the session about 12 million handsets being sold a month, of which 400,000 were feature phones. So smartphones, about a 4% number, and right now the number is 7-8% of new phones sold. So obviously, as a percentage of the installed base, smartphones are much smaller than that.
Yeah, and what is more important is that the smartphone market is looking north. The growth is happening there. Slew of launches are being done by the various brands. So that seems to be obviously, coming from a brand, I can assure you, when we launch a product, we launch it only because it's desired in the market. So the increased focus from most of the brand for this, launch of smartphones actually shows the good adoption or opening of the consumer for adoption of the smartphones.
If you look out over the next year or so, couple of years, what are the biggest changes in the features, the hardware-oriented features on feature phones and smartphones that we are likely to see in India? Let's focus on the feature phone side for the next year.
I think, I guess somebody wants to say.
Oh, sorry. Please, go ahead. Please tell us your organization and go ahead with the question.
Hi, I'm Animesh from Kedamani Securities. There's a perspective on the smartphone market that it's more of a platform war versus a device manufacturer war. How much of that do you find that applicable to the Indian market? Like people say it's iOS versus Android, not so much versus Apple versus Samsung versus any other HTC for that matter.
It's a great question. We talked about this a little beforehand. Whether it's on the feature phone side in India, let's talk about the feature phone side. Are we seeing ecosystems emerge or companies driving an ecosystem, apps as well as OS, as well as payments, as well as device? Or is everybody still horizontalized, device only, apps only, etc.? How are you seeing that? We talked about MediaTek and others.
See, what has happened is with the rollout of the 3G services and initially, at least with the low population of consumer on the 3G, we are getting good throughputs. So what has evolved now is not a hardware or a software strategy, but a pure experience play. I can assure you as a brand, we are equally concerned about the apps which we want to pre-embed on the handset, which is beyond what is available on the App Store. Now, the discovery on the App Store still remains challenged. We got to understand India is not a hugely literate company, and for pushing people up on the App Store, we first need to give them an experience. If that experience is satisfying, we open up the consumer to actually reach out to the App Store. So we carefully embed applications which we believe, depending on the handset type, my target TG, which we carefully believe that they will be adopted or liked by the consumers, and hence will begin the quest of finding more interesting apps or an experience which they're looking for. So from the perspective, I would not say it's either a hardware-driven adoption or a software-driven adoption, or by software I mean an operating system. But what is good about the Android ecosystem is it provides a fair play, and the openness of the solution actually gets you more and more application being built. Coming from the 2G ecosystem, wherein we were talking about huge of proprietary OSs which were being developed by the chipset players, and hence the compatibility of application across the brands remain challenged. the Android that way is providing to be a much better solution and a much better experience coming in.
I think related to that, let's talk about MediaTek for a second. It's sort of the brand behind the brand that we don't hear too much about. Can we talk a little bit about what they're doing and what their ecosystem plays in India?
So MediaTek has been instrumental in actually exploring this mobile phone market and the launch of many homegrown brands. And they've been embracing an operating system called Nucleus, which was proprietary to them. But as I just mentioned, the challenge remains about the compatibility of different applications which could be used on multiple proprietary operating systems. So what they've gone ahead and done is built up a complete ecosystem which they're calling as MRE, in which they're able to put most of these applications, stuff like social networking, wherein you have Facebook, you have Yahoo, you have Twitter, and browsers like Opera browsers, gaming companies like EA Games and all, up on a so-called app store which is working on the feature phones. So from the perspective of adaptability to multiple handsets, that provides the similar kind of an experience which is available on the smartphone.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting. I think my guess is, as an outsider, that MediaTek is seeing a threat from Android in the medium to long term, and they have to provide this ecosystem top to bottom to try and compete against that. Increasingly, we're going to see feature phones become more like smartphones in terms of screen size, and so users will want apps, payments, and other things to happen there. Let's talk about another sort of more whole experience that you've brought out in the market, the tablet. Can you talk a little bit about what that is and how you're enabling this apps plus device plus connectivity type experience?
Yeah, so Tab has been a very interesting market, and coming on the backdrop of the so-called netbook launch, which was about a couple of years back, was not as successful as was positioned for. The adoption of tablets by the Indian consumer has come out as a good delight. I think pricing will play a very big factor into this, but at the same time, the quality of experience is going to be equally responsible for either a mass level adoption or a mass level rejection. So I think what I'm trying to bring forth over here is the tablets is going to be pure value for money proposition rather than being the cheapest off the block. As the screen size gets bigger, I mean, we're talking about the base tablet being available in about 7-inch format. So at that screen size, the RTP or the resistive touch panel is really not a great proposition. Does, annoy the consumer, does hamper your application experience. And tablet is a very big, application or a content consumption device. So if your basic element which lets you browse through the content is not going to be up to the mark, I think that remains a big challenge in terms of brands looking at launching the low-cost tablet by, instead of going for a capacitive panel, going for a resistive panel. So personally speaking, and we've also had talks about this with a lot of analysts, I think one core requirement of the tablet would be a very good touch experience, because that's where my consumption of the content begins in. Secondly, as I said, the price point will define what your target TG is, how big the target TG is. So Micromax has just launched the Funbook, which is priced at an end consumer price of 6,500 rupees. It's a Wi-Fi tablet with a USB slot, and wherein we've gone ahead and pre-bundled Tata Photon Plus connection, which provides you 3G services there also. But largely, if you see the tablet experience, mass of the consumers are using the tablet on a Wi-Fi network. So the thought process of the design team at Micromax was, if we can actually take out the 3G radio from the the base design and go for a value for money product, and then probably for different segments we could work on the different versions, like probably a bigger screen format, or like a 10-inch, or maybe in the times to come, a great move by the carriers have been dropping of the tariffs of 3G. So we could also look at the option of integrating the 3G and the Wi-Fi put together into the tablet. But largely, tablet is going to be a very experience-centric product. It's from our side also, what we've tried to do is instead of just unleashing a hardware, we've given an experience. We've formed up three key genres in terms of education, entertainment, and live services which run on the tablet. In the education, we've partnered with Vritti and Pearson, who are bringing forth the content from the classrooms to the higher education. So I think the content is available across the different, CBSE, ICSE boards. They are available for the engineering and the medical and MBA preparations and all. On the entertainment, we've partnered with Big Flix, who is able to present some 6,000 odd movie titles, and these are full-length movie titles on the device. And there's a lot of adaptability that is being worked up on the Android, because the tab we've launched is an ICS version. So the content needs to be, spruced up for presentation on ICS. So as we talk, 6,000 movies are live, and I believe they are also converting some 100 odd movies every week, which are the new titles which are getting on the store. And we have partnership with India Games for games. I believe we have some 120 games which are available on the tabs as we talk, and more are getting converted to be presented on the Android layer. In live, we have TV solution, the live TV solution with about 54 channels being presented by Zenga, and more channels are being added. Aside of that, what they've been doing is bringing a lot of unedited content which is not available otherwise on the TV. So for example, some particular serials, they are presenting the uncut versions which are available to the consumer. And the good point is the way their content agreement works, they need not only play it live, they can also buffer up, because what we need to understand is, whereas the peak hours on the television is like from 8 to about 11 in the evening, the peak hours on the mobile is probably about 5 to 8 in the evening. So they bring up those popular programs to be presented during the 5 to 8 band. So that's one more interesting thing they've done. And on the live, and then we're also looking at bringing the other live event stuff, like, if there's a Formula One which is going live on a particular weekend, we're presenting that, like the IPL going live. So the idea is the live will, present you the different live events which are happening.
Thanks. Maybe I'll ask one last question, and if there are any questions, let me know. Go ahead. Please identify your organization and let us know.
Thank you. MRE has taken these corrective actions, or MediaTek has taken these corrective actions to come up with MRE. But then we have other innovations happening in technology, and Android is taking price point is coming down. So realistically speaking, where do you see the market share between a MediaTek or MRE vis-a-vis Android in, let's say, 18 months' time?
Interesting question. I just hope that the valuations do not either soar or dip for MediaTek on the stock exchange. But I think what is important to understand is we are a big economy. We are a hugely populous country. So as 3G evolves, we will still not be able to ignore 2G. We do still have a lot of the consumers who are really more of voice and SMS consumers, who are not looking at really a data connectivity, and that also reflects in the low data adoption rate that is being published by the different operators. So what I can tell you is at Micromax, 100% of the devices we are launching are data capable, but still about 17% is what we have found to be data enabled. So there's a huge chunk which is not actually still adopting data. So I would not say with the growth or popularity of Android, we are not going to see 2G adoptions happening, and apps is going to be an absolute must for anybody to start planning a device. But at the same time, the way the ecosystem is moving, it's a great thing to have apps, because we all are getting into more busy lifestyles. You tend to utilize every moment of yours which is like free. Probably if you're being driven from office to home or home to office, you tend to do a lot of work on the move. It might be through voice calls, it might be through using internet on your mobile device. So I would not say it's a threatening move of Android getting popularity, which is going to force MediaTek into kind of a backyard. And at the same time, if you actually see, MediaTek has also been keen on adopting Android. Their latest 3G chipset, which they are powering, the 6.5 series, is basically working on the Android. So I think it's about a partnership. It's about fostering an ecosystem and let more devices be added.
Sure. And do you think that since MRE is now more accessible, do you think that there will be more applications which will be available on that platform? Do you see that ecosystem getting developed?
See, me and Dave were talking about this a while back. Definitely there's going to be an adoption of the applications, but what still remains to be key, I think the session which was just before us was talking about that, is the payment or the payment recovery mechanism. As an ecosystem, as an industry, we need to find an alternate to the carriers till the time they really do not come back and present a much more affordable revenue share for the app developer. I think Voda has made a right move. If that can be paralleled by the other operator, that's what is more important right now. So the app developers need to be compensated well for the efforts, and they need to be encouraged to bring out the second or the next version of the app.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Please go ahead.
Dave, you started asking Vikas a question. What were the immediate trends you see in the next 12 months for the 2G handsets and the 3G handsets, starting with 2G? I think that's really important for all of us in this room. Give us some.
I think one thing which is coming out as the very foremost impression is that the screen size of the devices are getting bigger now. So, about a year back, we had the entry-level phone being presented in a 1.4-inch screen format. Let me assure you that's extinct right now. Even the 1.8 seems to be on the end of life cycle. So what we are, keenly observing, and I would be able to even comment onto that, is if given a 6 months forward window, we actually see 2.4 becoming the base, 2.4 inch becoming the base screen size for the feature phone, and even the feature touch phones should be starting from a 3 or a 3.2 inch upwards. And the smartphones actually, the price points that you're seeing right now on a 3 inch or a 3.2 inch is actually going to be presented on a 3.5 inch now. What is interesting to note is as the screen size gets bigger, the video will play a very big role. The streaming services, if we are talking about games, the animation content which is going to come into the games, the more interesting graphics is available. I think that's going to lead a good adoption of that particular app or that particular content.
So I think one very interesting thing that you shared with us, that 17% of the handsets that you supplied, say, over the last year, which were with the smaller screen, smaller form factor, but only 17% got data enabled and being used right now. So this means the new handsets on the 2G that do get delivered, which are almost 90%, because you mentioned about 8% is smartphones, actually come with a bigger screen, a better form factor, and much better enabled for data, even if it's 2.5G. So I think that seems to be, for all of us in this room, a pretty interesting ecosystem and a much better user experience. Forget the smartphones, even on the feature phones. What are your thoughts about this huge volume? Because you're talking about, out of the 15 million, almost 14 million into 12. So you're talking about 170 million phones with all of this coming in at a very affordable price.
Can you comment related to that on the speeds that data speeds you can get on feature?
See, what has been interesting, and we've been able to observe it, I would really like confirmation from a lot of the content partners and the app developers who are sitting in this room. Over the last 8 to 10 months, we've seen that 2G data throughputs getting better available at the consumer level. So about 10 or 12 months back, the actual throughput which was getting on, and I'm talking about the bigger metro towns, the throughput which was available in actual was anywhere between 10 to 12 kbps. This seems to have doubled now. So the data throughput even on edge now seems to be better. The delivery is better. You're getting less of session timeouts. It could be due to two reasons. It could be, the shifting of a large chunk of consumers onto the 3G by the carriers, which is freeing the 2G band and hence a better throughput for the data connectivity. And at the same time, I also believe the carriers are investing into better and more advanced equipment for the data carrying. In fact, I was there with the Uninor team and they were talking about launching the Edge Plus services, which is kind of what we earlier called as a WCDMA, which was able to give you a 384 kbps kind of a throughput. So, as you rightly said, the data adoption is increasing because the data throughputs which are available on the 2G is also getting better. In fact, I would also like to share one more, experience onto that. About 3 years back, both Vodafone and Airtel had launched the 2G version of iPhone, right? It was a spectacular hit globally, but did not do so good in India. One of the key reasons when we did some consumer research, we figured out that as the consumers bought it and tried to reach out to the App Store, which was the USP of Apple at that time, they were getting a lot of session timeouts. And hence their experience on the device was not what the consumers in the West had experienced. And over a period of time, they realized, it was a, fantastic looking hardware, great specs and all, but was really not able to deliver anything which probably a 5,000 rupee handset was not delivering. So, great devices like iPhone also struggled because the data throughput was not so good.
Part of what I'm hearing from you is that, if the speeds on 2G, 2.5G phones increases, the screen size increases, folks like MediaTek improve the MRE ecosystem out there, there's actually potentially a viable ecosystem, a little bit more of a viable ecosystem that emerges just on 2.5G and edge feature phones. We all talk about smartphones and 3G and all that, but that's a small market growing.
Another very interesting, vertical which is emerging is the 2.5G smartphone. Suddenly, we, as a brand, I can tell you, we are focusing a lot on the 2G smartphone as well because the cost of acquisition of the subscriber or the cost of acquisition of the customer is equally important. And we believe for the smartphone to go into the mass level, we have to reach not only the 5,000 mark, but also the 4,000 mark. Till the point that 3G is not able to do that, we believe there's a substantial audience available which would like to embrace the smartphone, even though it's 2G, if the price points fall to sub 4,000 rupees. So another good point for the app community would be to really look at what speed throughputs they would need to present the solution, and if at all they could balance it out to be presentable on the 2G, we might actually see a very big adoption of the 2G smartphones shortly. Exactly.
Maybe you can repeat some of that for the audience.
Yeah. So, very rightly pointed out, the 2G tariffs is like 98 rupees for the 2 GB of data connectivity that you consume over a period of month. And with 2.5G kind of a speed, 2 GB is substantial data that is available to you. If you see most of the youth has been, a big adopter of the social networking, which is actually delta text which gets transferred. So works perfect on the 2G speeds, and within the 2G, 2 GB of data bandwidth, data download that the operator offers. So at 98 rupees, I'm able to get completely active on my social networking. Now for the youth, the next important thing is the cost of the device. If the device can be equally affordable, he would be more than willing to shift from a feature phone to a smartphone.
Okay, I have a question. Hi, Sandalya. How is the adoption of your tablets and phone in enterprise market? Because every mature market has a good enterprise which is supporting it.
The reason of going on the tablet, on the Android, was that because today in the corporate world, there are a lot of developers who are developing applications which are supported on the Android. So yes, we are working with few corporates wherein we are customizing for their requirement. But to be very, very honest, it will be impossible for the brand to do multiple level of customization to suit the each corporate requirement. So what we have tried to do from our end is we have tried to provide a host of hardware functionalities that you might require in terms of the different ports and also the tablet has got an HDMI port, it's got a USB slot and all that stuff, which will help you do the different customization. But we would not be working actively onto creating those, different genres or specific applications, like probably an ERP on the move and stuff like that, for which there is enough organization available.
Okay. And I would like to partner with you on it. Let's take it offline. Sure.
Are there any, just to build on that, the enterprise market is sort of often overlooked in India for being, small, very SMB oriented, people not willing to spend on software, etc. Are there any verticals that you see or anybody in the audience sees that are sort of early adopters of mobile computing in the enterprise? Any verticals? Is it healthcare? Is there anything happening there?
We're doing some stuff on
Field work. Okay.
I think Dev, from our side, what we've been getting a lot on the query part has been one has been the Salesforce automation. I think that still remains a tough challenge to crack up in the different geographies across India, because we are a very state-oriented economy and a state-oriented sale country. So Salesforce automation has been one of the big area. Then we've also got a lot of queries on the healthcare, and I also believe there's some work being done at the level of the government of India on the healthcare when they're wanting to use this into myriad applications. But at the same time, I think the biggest driver till now has been the education, with a lot of focus from the government of India as well, and the different state governments planning to procure this as the first computing device and not the second.
Vikas, a related question to the point that you made earlier, that because of screen size, increase, you see adoption of video, and therefore, content, and it drives that ecosystem. Do you see other features like speech to text, peer-to-peer sharing, maybe, phones being used as an FM transmitter in the car, these kind of things emerging as new usages in our country?
See, we do have a very diverse customer base, right? In terms of consumers, if we talk, the habits, the patterns are very diverse, and it takes a fad to become a completely necessity feature that is required. Probably a year back, we were talking about the entry-level phones being only color and FM. Then suddenly MP3 came up, the way it was adopted with content being available both on the pirated way as well as the official with the different rights. The content drove the adoption of MP3. So I think the hardware, yes, but it will depend a lot with what is the fulfilling, complete ecosystem which is created along with the hardware. So as I said, it's all about experience now. The consumer is getting mature. We are not really getting those consumers who are getting on the network for the first time. We're getting a lot of these churns. I mean, most of the operator additions that we are seeing today are churn from one network moving to the other. So the basic requirement of the consumer is already through. He knows what is doing a voice and an SMS using a wireless network. So now he's getting more demanding. Now he's wanting something more from the device. And it all depends on, what is the cumulative experience that he gets, which will let him, adopt a particular feature or an innovation very, very well.
All right, last question.
That's interesting because, Micromax has always been a mass brand, right? We would not be shying away from the, the 20,000 kind of a price point. But again, the core focus of the brand remains value for money. We would not be offering any innovation or a, very interesting hardware just because it's interesting and innovating at a price of 20,000 if internally we are not convinced that's the price that the consumer has to pay. So I believe, on 20,000 kind of a form factor, we are talking about amalgamation of huge experience. It's got to be a phone. It's got to be actually a computing device because, somewhere down the line, if you see, tablet is more like the first computing device. You can do most of the thing, but you cannot do everything, right? As the market matures, you would also be required to do higher computations on the device. You'll be talking about much bigger processor, much faster processors, once that, starts coming in, I think that's where, you'll see actual amalgamation of the telecom and the computing industry. And that's what is the device we'll be looking at that segment.
Hey, one last question. How long do people on average hold their devices for these days? And how is that trend changing? And do you think it's going to be, accelerated even more?
This is an interesting question there, because what's also paramount is we got to see this in a relation of the falling hardware prices as well. So probably about 4 years back or 3.5 years back, the trend was to hold on to phone for anywhere between 2.5 to 3 years, which seems to have skittled to anywhere between 14 to 15 months now. That's one of the very prime reason of that is, 3 years back or 4 years back, I might be buying a device of a great MNC brand at a price point of 15,000 rupees, and for me to switch over a phone, I really needed a reason to, let go of a 15,000 rupee phone and then buy another, which probably would cost me at least 18,000 rupees. But with the falling hardware prices, now you get, so innovating products available at about 5,500 rupees. The propensity of yours to hold on to the phone for longer duration is getting less. Also, what we need to keenly observe is the changing lifestyles of the consumers. About a year and a half back, nobody, talked great about Facebook and social networking, and today it seems to be, as necessity as probably having FM radio on the phone itself. So, probably a phone that I bought 2 years back, maybe it might be at 20,000 rupees, but did not provide me an access to my social networking. I would have to go through the complete browser way to, get hooked onto Facebook. And suddenly I realized I want to just get off this phone and buy a 5,500 rupee phone, which provides me a single touch access to Facebook, because I use Facebook very often. So I think that's also, compelling the consumer to change phones very often.
Great. Thanks a lot, Vikas. I appreciate it. Thank you.